And nobody loves babies and kids more than I do. And when the concerns have come about the issues around education, I take that very seriously. For me, it's a sad day when Marin residents start viewing our children as a liability to our community instead of one of our most precious assets. The point I want to make today is that nothing gets people more excited and passionate in Marin County than land use issues. But nothing is more confusing and complicated in the understanding than how state, local, and federal laws all fit together in land use issues. And for those that showed up today that have concerns about the state laws that are guiding us in what we are doing here today, there's another avenue for communicating with your state elected officials to let them know when these kinds of laws are coming to the state and have input at that level as well. Once state law is passed, there are certain obligations that we have to comply with state law, and there are consequences when we don't. We've been sending housing elements to the state for certification since 1969. And just because we send the document that identifies where we have identified zoning for development does not mean that the bulldozers show up the next day to build those areas. As we heard today from staff, that there is another process that would happen that would allow local input on any of these projects that would come to the county for a specific development proposal. And there are times in all of the 11 cities and towns in the county where identified areas have been submitted and they still have not had a development proposal or have been built. Any specific development will go through a very thorough review process. We've seen this in Marin time and time again. We are not growing the way Manhattan grows. We are not growing the way the other urbanized areas grow. And I think to send that kind of fear out to the community that that's what's going to happen as a result of us approving another of our cyclical housing plans to the state is disingenuous and is not helpful to the conversation that we have to have on how do we grow as a community. The ABAG allocation is directly a result of what the state has sent to our councils of government to tell each of the 14 councils of government what their obligation is to try to accommodate the growth that we are experiencing in the state. And the housing element is reflective of the principles that have already been adopted in our general plan. Whether we add St. Vincent Silvera or not, whether we add Marinwood Plaza or not to the housing element report that we send to the state, does not negate the fact that in 2007 we had gone through a multiple year process to identify those areas for development. So whether we sent it to the state in a report or not, a developer could still come, as was pointed out, submit an application, as has been done in Marinwood, and then the public process begins on the appropriateness of that development application. In fact, once the housing element is certified, we can even reuse sites that haven't been built before and haven't been developed. And so as opposed to the 773 sites that we had for this cycle, for the next cycle, our total is 185 sites. That includes market rate. The total includes market rate and affordable, the mix, and we only get to that lower number if the housing element is certified on time. And as we've heard, there are some consequences if we don't certify this on time. Most of the speakers last Tuesday and today have said they support affordable housing, and I'm happy to hear that. But for many of the speakers, there was a but, a big but, at the end of the statement. And the reality is that while unincorporated Marin makes up the majority of our lands, most of our lands are protected. We have 2 national parks, 6 state parks, protected agriculture, county parks, 14,000 acres of county parks, and there are very limited sites that are available for development or redevelopment. And the cities and towns are responsible for the lion's share of the units, and that was one of the things that shifted with ABAG, was that development would occur inside of the city boundaries rather than sprawling, because most of the representatives that were sitting at ABAG did not want to look like LA County, where you have large suburban houses sprawling from hill to hill, and you can't tell the difference between one community and the next. The claims that 70% of the affordable housing is landing in Marinwood is simply not true. And as an example, Santa Venetia has a much higher number of affordable housing units than Marinwood or Lucas Valley. Currently, the only affordable development in Marinwood or Lucas Valley are the 80 units that were discussed earlier from the Rotary Village, which houses 80 very low-income seniors. It's managed by Bridge, and I'm not aware that any of the property values in the neighboring area have diminished as a result of that project. Clustering smaller units more densely helps us to protect our open spaces and use our resources more efficiently, while reusing the areas that have already been asphalted, wired, and plumbed. And this was what I had put forward in a campaign 12 years ago, and I've been working with the community to keep that process. In the case of Marinwood, as we heard earlier, San Rafael was proposing 2,100 of units. They were going to incorporate St. Vincent's and Silvera. And even during that campaign cycle, all other candidates were advocating at least 500 units of housing would be developed out there. Once San Rafael backed out of that plan for annexation, and it was apparent that it was going to be an unincorporated development, then the county went through its process. And now we see a cap at 121 market rate units, with up to 100 units affordable, which at the time St. Vincent's was interested in pursuing some senior housing for our seniors who are house rich and cash poor. And I just want to remind people that low income in Marin County means a family of four is earning about $65,000 a year or less. In most other places of the country, that is not low income. On the other side of the freeway, we have Marinwood Plaza, and it was a failed strip mall. We had drug deals, we have a perchlorate site, we had graffiti, we had vandalism, and certainly that site was not enhancing property values. But through a community-based process, the community came up with a vision that said, well, let's turn that into a mixed-use village that could support community serving retail and have some housing. There's a proposal coming to the table. Lately, I've become more aware of the high-density housing that's in my district. We have the downtown San Rafael housing that has on 4th Street a 6-story complex. McGinnis Parkway near the Civic Center, 3-story townhouse units. Across from Vallecito Elementary School, 3-story apartments. Villa Marin, which houses market rate senior housing for seniors on the hill above Northgate Shopping Mall, is a multi-storied program. And I live in one of 3 denser townhouse developments within a block of the Marinwood Plaza. For some of the reasons I moved there, affordability, great school district, open spaces, a creek, and I could jump on the bus on Highway 101 and get to my job at UCSF, where I took care of pregnant ladies for a living. And nobody loves babies and kids more than I do. And when the concerns have come about the issues around education, I take that very seriously. And I'm concerned about the quality of education for all of our kids, not just the kids that are living in the million-dollar homes, but every child who I believe deserves an excellent public education, and I've committed a lot of my time and effort to making sure that that works. And if a nonprofit development comes through, as was pointed out earlier, we are working with the county and with the Marin Community Foundation to ensure that there is some funding stream to draw down from. But the one thing to remember is that our public schools are not gated private schools. They are public schools. And the purpose is to educate all of our children that come to us. And I believe all of our children deserve a quality education. For me, it's a sad day when Marin residents start viewing our children as a liability to our community instead of one of our most precious assets. And no matter whether their families are earning $25,000 or $100,000 or $1 million, I believe every kid has the right to a great education. And I think that how we treat our children and how we accommodate our children goes to the heart of who we are as a community. I'm not happy with the way HCD has been interpreting the laws, and I'm setting up meetings in Sacramento to address this. Supervisor Arnold has been working on this. Supervisor Rice has been working on this, but I'm working with CSAC to help us try to address the issues of the baseline densities, about what we get to count as housing, about conversions. These are all really important issues that we still need to work on. But I do think that in light of all of the other cycles of housing elements we've passed, that we've done probably a more thorough job on this one than we have in any of the others. And thank you. I know I took some time, but I've been contemplating this for quite a while. We've worked on it for a long time. I think it's important.